Welcome, everyone, to the Contact Center Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. We have a very special guest on today, Luke Squires. Now, Luke, you are the Customer Experience Director at Sykes Holiday Cottages. You've been in the business for over 10 years. You had a really big retail background behind that. But what's interesting, you and I both share what we call our superpowers. We both are diagnosed with ADHD. And what I'd love to do, though, that gives us tremendous abilities, things we have to look out for and watch for as well. But before we get started, because the topic today is how to integrate like the transformational tech opportunities that are happening in AI and everything with traditional customer support. And what are the things that we need to know, we need to look out for? But before we do that, I'd love to just turn it over to you and learn a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. And I'm delighted to be talking to you today. Yeah, I guess, as you say, I'm Customer Experience Director here at Sykes Holiday Cottages. I'm really proud to be leading all of our customer and owner teams. We have nearly 16,000 owners now, nearly 23,000 properties that we manage. We're the UK's number one holiday rental company. So for me, it's a very privileged position to be in. As you mentioned, quite a varied background. I love travel. So I was with Virgin Atlantic Holidays, and that was an amazing time for me where I just got an absolute bug for travel, whether that be international or UK. And yeah, like you say, I have ADHD, and I think it gives a very different perspective on the way that I operate and the way I expect others to operate, and really gets me quite excited.
And let's get excited about our topic today, the idea of these transformational tech opportunities. We've got a very traditional, for years, we've got a traditional approach for how we do customer service, how we work with our agents. And I just love to ask you, what is your overall perspective on what's happening in the industry? Let's just start out that way.
My overall perspective at the moment is an incredibly exciting time for the call center industry. I think technology is the best it's ever been. It's ever evolving. It's becoming more accessible for companies. It still has a big cost, but I think, Steve, things like AI, it's no longer a new concept anymore. And it is something now that businesses can take on and they can start to run with. And I'm certainly getting very excited about watching that develop. And my team will tell you, I'm the first to find something on LinkedIn or find something on the internet and say, I want to do that. I want to put that in. But it is more accessible than it's ever been. And certainly, if I think even just 3 years ago, we were talking about generative AI and it's coming down the line. We all need to get prepared for it. It's here now. And it's proven. And it's a concept that is now proven. So I think it's a dead exciting time for us. But it definitely comes with its challenges that we've got to overcome with it.
Let's talk about some of those challenges, right? And I want to start out and let's talk about the consumer. All of this. So it's the end customer that we're just serving better. But the end customer, their preferences are changing quite a bit. The experience that they expect is changing quite a bit. Talk to us a little bit about that, and then let's talk about the technology and the role in that.
Yeah, consumer behavior has changed massively since the pandemic, is changing massively in the last 6 months, in the next year. What I find really interesting is, I guess the pandemic gave a purpose back to contact centers. I think at one point, contact centers were starting to be seen as a cost to a business. I sit here quite proudly going, do you know what? We're no longer a cost. We're a vital part of a business's operation. We are the front people talking to our customers every single day. So there isn't a bias, but there isn't a part of the business that is so important. But I think consumers have incredibly high expectations. They always have done, but those expectations continue to evolve and change rapidly. One of the things that I have been pushing at pace is, like many, is digitalization, it's automation, so that I have the most cost-effective and efficient contact center. That's important to me because I want consumers to be able to interact with our company, Sykes Holiday Cottages, in a way that is easy for them so that they can complete their query. However, what we're starting to see is that you've got a new generation that's starting to come in. And as a statistic I heard the other day was Generation Z are now prefer to talk to people on the phone. We're starting to see a bit of a loop in that round of going, okay, I guess when we were all kind of focusing on digital, I think what's really important as we're starting to strategize these, we're looking ahead a little bit more and we got the balance going, because I think this generation is saying I like interacting on the phone, but I also like doing digital. How do you make the two really seamlessly connect so that experience is great, they're not just about the consumer that's here today. We need to start thinking ahead because we're a very good industry at reacting. We are now in a place where we've got better data, we've got better analytics than we've ever had. So we can be a lot more proactive in our approach to it. So yeah, it's an interesting time, and consumers definitely keep us on our feet and keep us employed.
So two really important concepts that you brought up there. Then I want to dive into each of them. So the first one was you talked about cost centers traditionally, or contact centers being known as cost centers, like we're one of the biggest overhead costs in a business. But there's a direct line to profitability, revenue growth. You mentioned that we're the front line with the customers, and there's not a company alive that doesn't say we don't want to be customer focused. We don't want to be customer obsessed. And so here we're having all these interactions with them. What, in your words, what are the most direct impact that because we're having these conversations on a regular basis, we're the front line to the customer? How do you articulate the direct impact on the revenue and the growth of the business?
Many contact centers run with sales centers. So I've got a sales center. So absolutely I can put a profit to the operation that we do. And I think historically, that's what we always focused on in the contact center world, was that's the profit center and the service element is the cost center. I look at that slightly differently in the sense of the data that we are now able to get within our industry around service queries, around what customers want, around how they interact with us, directly feeds the strategic plans of your business. So I know through my service team, I know that consumers wanted to have more flexibility on their bookings. Why do I know that? Because they kept calling up to cancel at the last minute. What that enables us to do is offer products that allow flexible cancellations, for example. But it's only if we have that consumer insight, our business is able to do that. And I think the crossover between your contact center industry and the rest of the business has never been truly slick. And I think now, because we've got so much data, we can be an informed voice at that table. And for me, Steve, it all comes down to the data. If you've got something to back it up, there's credibility around what you say. So I think we play a vital part and we should be that voice.
And one part I'd love to get your thoughts on there too is you have sales operations underneath you, you said, but even the regular agents that are just taking questions in, that's an important part of a cross-sell and upsell strategy. That's a direct line to revenue. Do you have the data? Have you tracked the data on that side?
Yeah, ancillary sales in any business is a high profit making element. Within our organization, we work directly with owners, so there's not as much opportunity to add ancillaries on. But so they're live on the booking, it's hard to do. What we can do is we can inform the business of the types of queries that consumers are getting. For example, flexible cancellation. For example, better insurance policies. For example, is there a chef in the area that I'm staying at? And these things are not things that we completely offer at the moment, but they're things that are potentially revenue making. Now, without the voice of the agent and giving the agent the voice, how do you impact that? And I think that's a great opportunity for us all.
Huge opportunity. Okay, so now I want to go over to the second part that you introduced there, which is this Gen Z shift. We got ourselves trained on the fact that nobody's going to want to talk. And once the older generation, that trend moves on, nobody's going to want to talk to us on the phone, right? It could be a very small part of that. But we're actually seeing now that the younger generation actually does want to do that. And so tell me a little bit about that shift and how are you thinking about that in terms of your own internal strategy and what you're doing as a result?
Yeah. I mean, I find it hard to believe, Steve, every time I hear that stat. I've got a 14-year-old son and I don't think he's called me on the phone. He doesn't know how to make a phone call on the phone, but he certainly knows how to WhatsApp or Snapchat me. But it's really interesting speaking to other professionals within our industry where the conversation that this generation is looking for is different to the conversation of the past, but they are wanting a conversation. So when I've tried to deep dive into what does this actually mean, because you can easily go, oh, right, they want to speak to someone or they want that personalized relationship. And like we talked to contact centers of old, actually, they want speed and they want more about speed and resolution. So whichever is the quickest way for them to reach an outcome so they can get on with their day, onto their next thing, that's what they're looking for, which is why voice started to rise in that generation, because actually sometimes picking up the phone and articulating your query and getting it sorted is the quickest way. But that generation is very much about lifestyle. So it is about enabling them to have the lifestyle that they want. So actually they want to be going out early one night. So they don't want to be waiting for a WhatsApp to respond. That's the difference. And that's really where I'm starting to think. One of the things I'm thinking about, Steve, and we've got a few prototypes on the go, is actually having use of AI voice bots. So they're talking to someone, but the query's being handled by AI. And we're seeing whether or not that fits the expectation. But who knows? We could be being too clever, but it is exciting.
That's one area of balancing transformational tech and service demands, and how the service demands are evolving and changing. The tech is evolving and changing. So basically what I'm taking away from you is, if I balance the tech, if I keep my eye on what my customers want, like the insight you said there, they just want the fastest resolution. They just want to get on in their day. So if picking up the phone is going to do it, let's do that. So that balance, tell me a little bit more about that in terms of what you're thinking about how you're going to be operating differently a year from now than you are today.
Yeah. So when I'm looking down the line, I think 18 months, 2 years ago, thought that I would not necessarily have as human focused contact center as I probably will have. So I think I was very much going after an automation strategy. And I remain very focused on that, because I do think as an industry, we do have the tools there to be really efficient now, and therefore we can work differently. I think what I'm starting to do, and again, I go back to data and insights, for me, it's golden stuff. I'm being very particular over the types of queries that I believe, or the team believe, or the data tells us is a basic human right that can be completed in an automated way. So for example, someone being able to update their payment details, you should be able to do that in this day and age in an automated way. So it's important to me to make sure, yes, I want to have that human element, but I absolutely have got to get the basics. So we're working through all of those kind of transactional queries as we speak. I'm going to have 65% of those queries automated by the end of this year. What that will then enable me to do is have a team of people that are available when we need them available, but clever. And I think this is where the AI comes in as well. So why will I not need to go to the same level of resources I think I would have gone to? Because I am going to be using, and I'm using AI quite heavily. After call work, for example, I've got automated transcripts. So my team no longer sit there and write loads of notes up after their calls. That enables me to be efficient in my headcount, but also deliver the service that I believe our consumers expect. WhatsApp, SMS, they're 6-7 times more productive than taking a phone call. So how do we push that through, and how do we make sure the response times are really effective? And again, for me, the enabler and the thing we're all really lucky to have is this new AI world. Being able to prompt an agent on a call, that you've got, being able to prompt the agent of the type of response to give on the call. It's a game changer. It's really exciting, because when I was an agent on the phones, I didn't have that. So we can really be pushing average handling time, wrap time, and delivering better than we've ever delivered. It's just a good time to be in this industry.
You brought something up there that you talked about. What I thought I was going to have in terms of live workforce a year from now is changing and it's expanding. But there's also workforce demographics that are changing as well at the same time. Tell us a little bit about that, because that's an important part of the equation.
I think it goes back to the generation discussion. Our workforces have been heavily millennials over the last number of years, and a mature generation as well. We've got the generation Z's coming through, and they expect different. And I'm very challenging of my team in the sense of, it's not for them to adapt to the way that we work. We need to adapt to the way that they want to operate. And that enables us to get the best out of our people. So again, I think we all should hold ourselves to account to be really open-minded to the changes in the workforce. And I'm seeing it quite significant. I think I've never seen a workforce that is more passionate and excited about progressing in their careers, but really quickly. And I think back to when I started out, 3 years as an agent and then a manager. Now people want to do it within 6 months, within 12 months. And if I haven't done that, they're looking around for the next job. But it's the change in expectations. So how do we enable ourselves as an industry to support that? And I very much now talk to my team around our recruitment and actually being far more vocal around the fact that we are a feeder into a career for agents. So we will have some that come in and want to be managers, but actually they want to be marketeers, or if they want to work in HR, how do we give them a really great grounding within the contact center and the business to enable them to do that? So again, I think it's really thinking quite differently, because historically we've recruited call center agents with call center skills based on wanting them to stay in a call center for a long period of time. And we definitely have to move that mindset away. Otherwise, you're going to have a high attrition rate, which I think a lot of us are seeing now anyway at the moment. So how do we stabilize that?
It's interesting because the normal thought process is really good training and really good coaching and absolutely giving them that career progression. But you're addressing that right up front, which is incredible. What are agents saying, prospective agents coming in, when you talk to them about that? Is that one of the most important things? Is there criteria whether they want to join the company or not? Or how does that play?
One of the biggest things that I'm seeing from the team, the colleagues that are joining now, this generation has incredibly high values and has incredibly high morals. They want to work for a business that cares about that. So I'm seeing more and more, you and I talked at the beginning, neurodiversity. They want to work for a business that understands it, that believes in it, and that champions it. They want to work for a business that appreciates diversity and talks about it and does something about it. And I think businesses have absolutely embraced diversity and all sorts over the last few years. But this isn't about fad. This isn't about saying it. They want to feel it. And it is a very different way of working. Recently, and I can only talk about my particular situation, but we had Neurodiversity Celebration Week. First time ever as a senior leader have I stood up in front of the business and talked about it from my personal perspective. But I did that because I know that's what the workforce are looking for. They're looking for people to lead it within the DNA. Salaries are important, benefits are important, but actually it's about how I feel about the business. Can I connect with the business? Can I connect with the leaders of the business? Do I believe in that business? And if they don't, they'll quickly jump off and find somewhere that does. And I believe we're a big business, and I believe passionately that we should be leading that sort of behavior and that sort of change.
The way I would summarize what you just said is the culture of the company is one of the most important things to attract and retain the right talent in your agent pool. Is that the right takeaway?
I think, Steve, that's a great summary of a long-winded answer.
It's interesting because I've actually interviewed a chief people officer who had his PhD, and he did his thesis on connecting the dots, the data points to, if we have a culture that creates more employee engagement, it will create ultimately more client engagement and more growth for the business. So tying directly the culture of the business to long-term sustainable growth, we all know that's true, but it seems like, especially in the younger generation, you're seeing that it's even more true than ever before.
I'm seeing this a lot deeper as well, Steve. It's a lot deeper engagement and trying to retain your team now. Again, of old, how I would have done it previously is made sure we had Beer Friday and that I had pizzas on the go and we're ringing the bell. Now, I still do all of that because I absolutely love that myself and I get real energy from that. But I do see it's deep. It is deeper than that. And it is trust, and it is belief in a business that they're doing the right thing and they've got the right organizational values. And yeah, I think that is a significant evolution.
Absolutely. Now, how do you take a company culture like that and the importance that you've just talked about? Is a big part of this is outsourcing partners that are actually part of outside organizations, BPO partners that you've hired. Just tell me a little bit about how you leverage outsourcing partners and the importance there. And then let's dial it back to the company culture that you were just talking about as well.
Sourcing is an interesting topic for me. So it's not something that we do at Sykes. If I think about outsourcing, I think outsourcing has a negative connotation because that's taking jobs from people that work here and putting it into an outsourced provider. Again, I think that has massively evolved and it is no longer about that. You can still do both and actually get something even better. I guess where I see other colleagues doing outsourcing particularly well is when they're able to utilize their technologies and get efficiencies from the outsourcers who specialize in that type of work and complement the operations that you have on shore. And so I think, yeah, for me, it's an interesting one because it's not one I'm necessarily deeply passionate about at the moment, but it's a little bit like AI to me. If you'd asked me 18 months ago about AI, I would have said, oh, we'll see. And now it's here. It is one that I think I have seen some companies doing incredible work with it, having incredible relationships with it as well. I think that's always the thing, Steve, that's made me a little bit nervous, is that I am a passionate people leader and I like being in control of the culture. And I guess that links to your question. It's still that culture. And I think it's something that I've not yet got myself comfortable with as a leader. And if I was to ever look at doing something like that, one of my primary focuses would be culture, tech, and then probably the KPI element of BPOs. But yeah, you've got to be in a brave world, I think, to do it. But I see it work.
One thing you mentioned there is being a leader, and culture is one of those things. KPIs, the vision, the company, it all has to come from the leaders. What's the leadership style in this kind of the modern times that we're at, right? There's transformational changes that are happening in the business. How important is leadership of the company and involved in what you're doing and creating those customer experiences that you know are going to make a difference?
Yeah, so it's pivotal. I've worked for some incredible leaders over my near 20-year career, and I've worked for some not incredible leaders, but I've learned loads from both. And some of that's not what to do, but it's been a good time. And I think for me, leadership in this day and age is probably the most important and the most successful part of what we do. My boss at the moment talks a lot about the transformational change of leadership. And he talks to us around how you can steer a team to success with the same people if you have the right focuses and you are pointing in the right direction. For me, authenticity, empathy, they're the biggest traits that I look for in a leader and something that I fundamentally really believe in, and transparency. And I think, again, we are living in a world where we should be treating all of our teams like adults. There shouldn't really be any secrets around what it is we're doing, because the moment we have secrets, you can't turn that ship. And that honesty is very important. I look at my senior team that work for me, and I hope that they feel empowered to make decisions. I hope that they feel accountable, but equally supported. I don't run my operation with the iron rod. I'm passionate about KPIs, but because it excites me. And when I see them moving, it's a great place to be. I focus heavily on celebrating successes. Again, I had one boss many years ago say to me, Luke, it's much better to catch people in rather than catch them out. So again, I like to focus on the things that go really well and just create that kind of high performing level 5 leadership environment.
So here's my last question. We've talked about a lot. Our human brains, we can only remember about 2 or 3 things at a time, especially with those of us that have ADHD, right? So if there was one main takeaway that you wanted the leaders that are watching or listening to this podcast to take away from this today, what would that be?
I would say that my biggest takeaway is don't be naive to the changes that you're seeing in consumer behavior, colleague behavior, and digital behavior. And unfortunately, I don't think those 3 things will line up. But it's moving at a fast pace, but there are proven sources out there now that we can, for once in our industry, be so much more proactive about the way that we approach it. So be aware of it, but plan for what's coming up, because it's exciting and we can deliver amazing things as an industry if we're ahead of the game with it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Here's one thing I know is going to happen. People are going to have questions. And if they do, is it appropriate that we give out a link to your LinkedIn profile that people can reach out and they can get a hold of you?
That'd be amazing. Yeah, I'd love to connect with people.
Fantastic. The goal, the mission of this podcast is to get different perspectives from different leaders all throughout the industry so we can learn and share. And if we do that, then that's the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you were a big part of that rising tide today. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming on.
No, it's been amazing. Thanks so much for having me, Steve.